Hey guys, how are you doing? I am freezing. It's so cold here in Cape Town at the moment today. I've literally been under my duvet doing work all day because I couldn't face sitting in my cold office, which is where I am now. But anyway, came in here to talk to you, so I'm sure I'll warm up soon. I also have a class at 5:30. Which is a combination of yoga and high intensity impact training. I think that's what it stands for, HIIT. Pretty scared. I haven't done a proper class in a very long time, so I'm feeling quite unfit at the moment. So feels like I'm really staying out my comfort zone in doing this class. But I figure I'm on Zoom, so if I don't cope with it, I can just turn my video off. So at least there's a nice boundary there. Or not a boundary, a way out. But anyway, I'm sure it'll go well. And if nothing else, it'll warm me up. So that's great. So yeah, looking forward to that. And a friend signed me up and she does it. So it'd be nice to do that together too. Cool. Right, so boundaries today. That is what I want to talk to you about. So it's come up a few times in my conversations with other people around this idea about boundaries. So I thought, let's touch on it, and I will go into more detail at another time. But for now, I wanted to start with the basics of what is a boundary. Because if you don't know, it's going to be incredibly hard to set one. Okay, so if you have any questions about boundaries as I'm talking, please put them in the comments. And if you're here with me, please say hello, and then I know that you're out there as well. Okay. Yeah, I got a thumbs up. Someone's with me. Cool. Okay, so a boundary is basically a line that separates a part of you from other people. Oh, hey, Killian. Nice to see you. So a boundary is like this barrier, this invisible barrier that, basically separates you from somebody else. And the reason for this, the purpose of setting a boundary, is to protect yourself in some way. So you're either protecting your rights, you're protecting your thinking, you're protecting your feelings, protecting your physical self, protecting your needs, your energy, basically protecting yourself. And it's not about doing it from a place of fear or a place of, like when I said about protecting your rights, it's not about being scared that someone's going to take something from you. It's about saying, this is my space and that is your space, and let's respect each other. So it's really a good thing. It's about respect and integrity and feeling safe to be who you are, and creating the space for you to do that. Does that make sense, or did I say that a little wishy-washy? Let me know. So there's different types of boundaries, there's different areas where you could set boundaries, and I'll list some of those examples now. So there's physical boundaries. Now, physical boundaries could be around your actual physical body. It could be about your appearance. It could be even about your environment, your physical environment. So some examples would be, if you're in a relationship with someone, it might be something like, I am not comfortable kissing in public. That's a boundary for me. So your partner knows, okay, I mustn't give her an old smoocheroo when we're out in public because it makes her feel uncomfortable. So it's kind of like, this is my boundary, please respect it. So that's a kind of simple, example. Another around appearance might be if you have a creepy coworker who's constantly commenting on how you are dressing. If that makes you feel uncomfortable, you can 100% put down a boundary and say, I'm not comfortable with you commenting on my appearance. If you're going to continue doing that, I'm going to need to have another conversation, with our manager about that, or something to that effect. So you are allowed to set boundaries around what other people say about you, your body, basically, your appearance. At the end of the day, whether it's justified, horrible word to use, but what I mean is whether you think you are right or wrong for setting the boundary doesn't really matter. The point is you are allowed to say, this is okay and this isn't okay. And if people want to have functional relationships with each other, it's so important that they honor each other's boundaries. So, like, I'll give you an example. Someone I know was quite religious and would have a problem, and had a friend who used to kind of say things all the time like, oh God, or oh Jesus, or that type of thing. And it bothered her. So the person who was saying it didn't mean it in a bad way. They were just, kind of using that slang. But for the person who was quite religious, it bothered her. So she set the boundary and said, it really makes me uncomfortable when you say stuff like that. And immediately her friend was very amenable to being careful about saying stuff like that because she didn't want to offend her. So even though she didn't find it offensive, she respected the boundary that her friend had put down. And that's the whole point, okay? So you don't have to feel like there's anything wrong with saying to someone, I'm not okay with you speaking about my appearance. Because at the end of the day, if it makes you feel uncomfortable, you're allowed to say something, okay? I just want to impress that upon you. So so physical boundaries. So it could be around what's okay, touching, all of that. It could be about verbal stuff. Could be about like actual physical boundaries, like in your environment. So for example, I'm in my office now doing this live. If Garth were to come in here and start making noise while I'm doing a live, that would bother me. So we have actually a non-verbal agreement that when I'm in here with the door closed, he doesn't come in. So that would be an example of him respecting my work boundaries. In this case, the physical boundaries of my office space. You can also have emotional boundaries. So you are allowed to feel however you want to feel. And sometimes people like to have opinions about that and tell you what they think you should be feeling instead. So you are perfectly okay to set a boundary and say, you don't have to agree with how I feel, but I am allowed to feel it. So please don't discount it. Something to that effect. So you can definitely set boundaries around emotions, and also about topics of conversation. So if talking about something really upsets you and you don't want to talk about it, it's okay to say that. It's not censorship. It's not trying to tell people what they can and can't do. It's about saying, this makes me feel uncomfortable. Please respect that. Because there are billions of people on this planet. So I don't think that someone needs to have that conversation with you. If it makes you feel uncomfortable, they can go have that conversation with someone else. Okay, so it's about give or take. And there'll be things that that person doesn't want to talk about that you would need to respect. So that's an example. What else? Mental boundaries. So one's around thinking and thoughts. And this you see a lot when people have differing opinions. Have you ever had a conversation with someone who just keeps trying to push their opinion on you because they know that you think differently? It's so frustrating. So setting boundaries around that could be really helpful in saying we're allowed to think different things. It really bothers me when you try to change my opinion. I'm open to learning and having a discussion about it, but if I decide to continue believing what I believe, I really need you to be okay with that or to just drop it, whatever the case is. So there's those types of boundaries as well. And then there's even spiritual boundaries around belief systems. It's so important to respect one another and respect each other's right to have our own beliefs. So, that's kind of what boundaries are about. I could talk about boundaries for hours. So I'm just trying to pick and choose what to talk about now, and I'll touch on some more at another time. So if you have any questions, please let me know. The next thing I want to say about boundaries is, how do you set them? So for me, the very key point to remember is a boundary is not about somebody else's behavior. A boundary is about how you feel because of that behavior and what you are willing to do if that behavior continues. So the focus should always be on you, not on the other person. If the focus becomes about the other person, then it starts to feel like you're weaponizing the boundary, like you're setting an ultimatum. So let's go through an example. If whenever I meet up with you, you are late every time I see you, and I end up sitting and waiting for half an hour for you to arrive. Once off, that's fine. But if it were to happen, more than 3 times, I would get pretty pissed off about that. So it would then be up to me to set a boundary with you to say, when you run late, maybe you go to why it bothers you about that. So for me, I've got a button about not being considered. When people push that button and I feel like my feelings haven't, or my time, or I basically have been disrespected, I feel like I have not been taken into account, that upsets me and it actually hurts me. And it is my thing. It's my wounding to work with and heal. But as a friend, I would expect someone to be considerate of me. And keeping me waiting half an hour every time I meet them, I don't believe is very considerate. So now I need to set a boundary. If I were to say to the friend, if you are late again, I won't be meeting you anymore, that would feel like an ultimatum. That would feel like I'm weaponizing the boundary. I'm basically telling them you have to change or I'm punishing you. And that's not the way to do it. Because imagine if somebody said that to you, you would not be happy and you would not feel invited to respect that boundary. You would be like, screw you, and you'd get in an argument about it, or you'd walk away and you'd stop being friends with them. Maybe not that extreme, but it wouldn't end well, okay? A better way to do it would be to say, I've noticed the last few times we've met, you've been running half an hour late. I appreciate that you're really busy. I'm busy too. And when you keep me waiting half an hour, it frustrates me because I've wasted that time. I could be doing something else. And it makes me feel not considered. At least send me a message to let me know you're running late. Or if you know earlier that your schedule's out and you're going to be late, let me know so I have the option of coming a bit later too. So I'm not sitting there feeling foolish, twiddling my thumbs, type of a thing. So the focus must be on me. This is how I feel. And then you move into, well, I already said that. So you could perhaps say, if you're going to be late in the future, please can you let me know so that I can make a decision about whether I'm going to be there on time and wait for you, or whether I'm going to come late, or whether we actually need to cancel because I don't have time, to wait for you for half an hour type of a thing. So it's kind of like saying, well, if this happens again, how are we going to deal with it? That's the whole point. Because then you kind of have almost like a contract with the person where they know what's expected and you know what's expected and you're on the same page. So having a boundary like that, bringing it up as a conversation is so helpful because then you can both reach an agreement where you say, okay, this is what I think is fair. Okay, this is what I think is fair. Let's, make an agreement around that. So that's where a boundary could kind of move into a conversation. If you wanted to set a harder boundary, like if it's super important to you, you could say, in the future, if you're going to be more than 15 minutes late, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to meet you because my schedule is super busy. Like, you don't have to justify your boundary. Very important. You really don't. But it can go a long way in helping someone understand where you're coming from if you explain the reason why the boundary is so important to you. But again, it's not about justifying it. It's simply about helping the other person understand. Because if they understand, they might respect your boundary a lot more. So it's confusing, it's complicated, it's messy, you're not going to get it right the first, second, third time, maybe the fourth time, like the hardest part about a boundary after you've been brave enough to set one is to maintain it. Like that's the hardest part because I find as soon as I set a boundary with someone, I feel bad about it. I feel terrible and I think, oh my gosh, they're not going to like me anymore, they're going to think I don't like them. And that's because I have this old story going in my head about other people's needs are more important than mine. And I have this responsibility that sits on my shoulders about how I have to be there for other people. So if I set a boundary and I say, actually, I'm not going to be there for you in that particular instance, it really challenges that old story inside me that says I'm responsible for other people's feelings, which is not true, but it's what I've been believing for most of my life. So it takes a while to change that narrative. So that's why boundaries are so hard to maintain, because we typically feel bad afterwards. And not only that, but the other person will most likely push back against your boundary. Not everybody's going to be really respectful and say, oh, yes, I see where you're coming from, no problem. Some people are going to push back because they want you to be a certain way, or they're used to you being a certain way. So if they're used to me being someone who gives all my time and energy and resources and support and help, they're going to be used to that. So if I suddenly put a boundary on that and say, actually, I'm not willing to give quite so much anymore, they're going to need to either figure out how to do that for themselves, or they're going to go looking for it elsewhere. Or they're going to push back against me until I cave and I end up giving them all my energy again, as an example. So that's why boundaries are hard to maintain, because we either go back on what we say, or we don't follow through on what we said we were going to do if they continued, or we might even lose relationships in the process. I guess it depends on the severity of the matter. But it's important. It's important to honor yourself first. Honestly, like, if you can put yourself first, you are modeling to other people that it's okay to do that, and that they can do that too. Like, imagine if you had, so some of you might be parents, but imagine if you had a small child following you around, learning from you and soaking up everything that you're doing. Like, you are modeling to them how to be a healthy, functioning, happy, empowered, autonomous adult. So if you can't tell someone how you expect to be treated, what are you teaching that little person following you around? Okay? Imaginary people following us around now. But I think once I'm a parent, then it would be a lot easier to imagine that, because I would have little people following me around. But like Killian, you work with children, and I'm sure other people out there are parents or work with kids or something like that. So you get what I'm saying, that you are modeling, and not just to kids. I mean, you are modeling to people that you're in relationships with, to family members, to friends. What you put out is what you get back. So if you are putting out weak, loose, flimsy boundaries, that's what you're going to get back. Whereas if you are putting out solid, firm, I'm honoring myself and I want you to honor me too, that's what's going to happen. And most importantly, last thing I'm going to say before I click off, is that it goes both ways. And that was the biggest realization for me when it comes to boundaries, is somebody said, it's all good and well to set boundaries, but can you respect other people's boundaries? And I was like, what? Of course I can expect other people's boundaries. And then the example was about not being so available on the phone. And I was thinking, so sometimes I like to not be so available. Like on a Sunday, for example, I don't want to talk to anyone on a Sunday if I can help it. Like this Sunday, I actually had 2 conversations on the phone, but I hadn't on the Saturday, so that was okay. So basically, one day on the weekend, I need to not talk to anyone, and that I need for my own energy, because I spend so much time talking to people during the week. So that's a boundary for me around my energy and my time. And I'm quite happy enforcing that now. If somebody phones me, I don't answer. And I say, I'm busy today, I'll talk to you tomorrow. I'm busy honoring myself, taking care of myself. So I'm okay with that. But if I wanted to get in contact with someone and they didn't want to talk to me, I'd feel differently about it. I naturally would be like, why are you rejecting me? Why are you not helping me right now? So I had this really hectic realization that I'm not so good at respecting other people's boundaries all the time. Like, I know sometimes with my sister, if she doesn't want to go somewhere but I want her to come, I'll push her and go like, no, come, no, you must come, oh, please come. I'll guilt her, I'll make jokes, I'll, really do everything in my power to try and get her to come with. That's not respecting her boundary around how she wants to spend her time. So my challenge to you is think about your own boundaries and how they are feeling pushed or disrespected at the moment, and think how do you want those to change? So is there a particular area in your life, start off with one thing and let's go from there. What is one boundary that you would like to have at the moment that you currently don't feel you have? Okay, so for example, the boundary around time. Do you feel like people can just ring you at any time and you'll answer and you'll be there for them? If that is taxing on your time, there's a boundary that could be set there about how much you're willing to talk to people right now. That's an example. It could be anything. So think about one boundary that you really want to start setting and start thinking like, well, how do I want that to look? And start putting together a boundary statement, something that you could say to someone that would help you set the boundary. So like, I know that you like to get my opinion on things and I love being there to support you. I need to look after my energy right now, and being on the phone 5 times a day is really draining my energy. So I'm afraid that, when I start to feel tired, I'm not on the phone, and I will get to you when I feel ready to do so. Hope that's okay. Something like that. You got to play around with the words and find words that feel comfortable to you. But it's really important to say the boundary, like to state it. Because sometimes we think the boundary, but we don't actually say it to the other person. So they don't know we've set this boundary in our head. And they're like, why is this person pulling away from me? So if you haven't stated the boundary, then how can you expect someone to respect it? So, right, going off on tangents as usual. So the challenge is, think about one area where you would like to put in a boundary. Start writing down what could that boundary look like. Remember, it must be about you, not about the other person. And also have a think about other people and how they've been putting boundaries down with you, and starting to have some awareness around, do I respect other people's boundaries? Like if this specific boundary is one that I want, do I give that to other people? And think about it. It's not about judging yourself. It's not about criticizing yourself. It's simply about creating more awareness. Okay. So start there, and we'll take it further next time round. But let me know if you have any questions around boundaries in the meantime, so that I know specifically what will be useful to you. Cool. Alrighty, well, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. If you are in Cape Town, I hope you stay warm. If you're anywhere else, I hope you're cool or warm, depending on what your weather's doing. But I know for me, it is freezing. And I will chat to you tomorrow. Morning meditation at 9 o'clock South African time, and afternoon advice again tomorrow at 4. And don't forget about Good Night Gratitude tonight. Even I didn't comment on Good Night Gratitude last night. I don't think anyone did. So it's because I'd scheduled it because I knew I was busy, and then I forgot to go back to it. So tonight, if you're with me, let's make an effort to focus on something that we're grateful for. It's a nice way to end the day. Cool. You're welcome, Killian. Thanks for joining me. I hope that was helpful. And I will chat to y'all later. Goodbye.